Okay, thank you for coming. Still a little warm this time of year. No, it's just the time. Don't worry about it. There's nothing that can be done. It's this time. I'm surprised. I've lived here for a few years in California, but I grew up in Illinois, so I'm used to colder weather. So again, in the first class, we talked about meditation. And then last week, I gave a short Dharma talk on the Four Noble Truths. So the Four Noble Truths are the truth of suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path to the cessation of suffering. And the path, the last one, the fourth noble truth, is the Eightfold Path. So this is the basic structure of the method that the Buddha taught on how to overcome our ignorance and thus overcome suffering and become a Buddha. Right? Of course, there are specific methods, different meditation techniques from different traditions, and we've talked about that a little bit in the past. Some traditions use lots of visualization. The Tibetans, they spin prayer wheels. They have prayers inside, and they're spinning prayer wheels. It's like an amplifier for their mantras. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. And they circumambulate stupas, all these kind of practices. And you see this in different parts of the world as well. So there are these kinds of practices. At this temple, we do a lot of chanting, Namo Ida Phap, Namo Ida Phap, Namo Ida Phap, and sutra chanting as well. So there are different specific methods, but this is the structure for how we go about overcoming ignorance. So today I'll probably just do the first four, and then we'll continue next week. So you'll have to come back for part 2. So this starts with a quote from the Buddha. I'm not sure exactly where it comes from. It's from one of the sutras. But this describes right view. And what is right view? Knowledge with reference to suffering. Knowledge with reference to the origination of suffering. Knowledge with reference to the cessation of suffering. Knowledge with reference to the way of practice leading to the cessation of suffering. This is called right view. So basically, the Buddha is saying right view is knowing the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. But it's not just knowing them intellectually. We can remember this list. Right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, so on and so forth. We can have that memorized. It's not just having knowledge. Right view is accepting the truth of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. So it's more than just memorizing something. Then we also talk about right view in terms of karma. Not just knowing about karma, the law of karma, but accepting the truth that our causes lead to results. And also, as I've said in the past, how when we experience some result, how our reaction creates new karma. We're creating new causes that will lead to new results. So this is karma. So accepting this is part of right view. And then we also talk about the 3 or 4 Dharma seals. Impermanence, suffering, non-self, and nirvana. Now I say 3 or 4 because it depends on what tradition you're talking about, how they write these out. And even within a particular tradition, one teacher might prefer 3, another might prefer 4. So sometimes you see impermanence, suffering, and non-self. Only those 3. Sometimes you'll see impermanence, suffering, and nirvana. And sometimes you see all 4. So impermanence we talked a little bit about last time. So this is, things are made up of parts, and they come together because of various causes and conditions. So eventually they're going to come apart. When the causes and conditions change, things come apart. So this is impermanence. Nothing lasts, basically. Nothing that is made up of parts, nothing that has a beginning will last forever. All meeting ends in parting, all birth ends in death, and so on. So this is impermanence. Suffering we also talked about last time. The word for suffering, dukkha, actually, remember, it has this continuum of meaning, everything from dissatisfaction all the way up to full-on suffering. In English, suffering is a much more specific word. It's a stronger word. So the truth that we experience suffering, in part, or in large measure, because we don't really get impermanence. So, as I've said many times, we keep grasping at temporary things in order to have some kind of happiness. But what happens? Impermanence. And then we don't have that happiness anymore. Or even worse, we grasp at things that really give absolutely no happiness, and we experience immediate suffering. I'm thinking about somebody who thinks, well, if I'm rich, then I'll be happy, so I'm going to go kill people and rob a bank. That's suffering. You're smiling. You're not thinking about robbing a bank, are you? No? Okay, good. Just wanted to check. So then, so we've talked about these two before, but non-self. Now, the reason why non-self is sometimes left out of this list of the 3 or the 4 Dharma seals is because they put it under impermanence. It's like a subsection of impermanence. But sometimes it's pulled out separately. And so here we're talking in a sense about the impermanence of the self. So conventionally, there is a real self. My name is Hui Hai. You're Nyap Bao Kwak, right? So conventionally we have a self. I'm a separate being from you. I live a separate life, and so on. But just like outer objects that are made up of parts, so are we. We are made up of parts that will eventually come apart. But there is something that actually passes from this life to the next. And we say that it is mind, but it's not like this ball of light. Christians talk about a soul. I don't really like this term soul in the context of Buddhism because it has this, for me it feels like Hui Hai jumps, this little ball of light or whatever that is, Hui Hai jumps from body to body, and that's not what's happening. It is consciousness, but stripped of the personality, except for our habits. Basically, this is what jumps from life. This is what moves from lifetime to lifetime. It is the continuity of our habits. Some people have a much stronger tendency towards anger. This moves from lifetime to lifetime, and that anger, that habitual anger, shapes their next life. Other people have a much stronger tendency towards compassion and selflessness. This tendency moves with them to the next life and helps shape that next life. So there is something that moves on, but it's not this fixed and solid being on which we can stick a label, like a name. Even in our own lifetimes, I went from being an infant to a toddler to a baby to a little boy and then a teenager, and now I'm an adult. So even in this lifetime, there's some continuity, but obviously I am not the exact same person as the baby who was 1 day old, right? So just think of this stretched out on a larger scale. There is some continuity, but there is change. So we aren't these fixed, unchanging beings. The change happens relatively slowly, though. It happens fast enough that when I explain it, intellectually we can grasp it, right? Going from a baby to a teenager and so on. But it happens slowly enough that we move through life with this false view of ourselves as these fixed beings. But just like outer objects that are constantly changing, we can't hold on to them and extract some lasting happiness from these changing things. We can't hold on to this idea of an unchanging self because it's not real. So this is what we're talking about when we talk about non-self. And then the last is nirvana. So in the Theravada tradition, Theravada means school of the elders. So this is the Buddhism of Sri Lanka, Burma or Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and a little bit in Vietnam. In the Theravada tradition, nirvana, or nibbana, they say, is you overcome ignorance to the extent that you are no longer forced to cycle through the system of birth, old age, sickness, death, and rebirth. So you simply move out of this cycle of birth, old age, sickness, death, and rebirth. And then you're in this state of peace. Okay? But in the Mahayana tradition, the great vehicle, and that's basically all other Buddhism, including this temple, right? We're a Mahayana temple. Nirvana is that, and it's also perfect Buddhahood. So if we achieve nirvana in a Mahayana sense, we're out of this cycle of birth, old age, sickness, death, and rebirth. The mind is therefore without ignorance, without attachment, without aversion. We're in perfect peace, a state of perfect peace and equanimity. And there's no more karma to arise. I think I've mentioned before that it's karma that pulls us into each of our lives. The force of our karma pulls us into each of our lives. But there's no more karma to arise. So that's true for Theravada. This is the Theravada view. But in Mahayana, it's also goes beyond that, and it's complete Buddhahood. So then that begs the question, what is a Buddha? Well, a Buddha is a being who does nothing and wants nothing except to bring enlightenment to other beings. That's all that a Buddha does. So a Buddha has no personal volition. A Buddha doesn't think, well, I could go over there and do that. Or I could go over there and do something else. What do I want to do? Well, I don't know, maybe I'll take the day off. Buddhas don't have this kind of internal dialogue. They see need and they go. That's all they do. In fact, the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, their helpers, are constantly reaching out to us. They're constantly trying to reach out to us by teaching the Dharma. They're constantly reaching out to us saying, don't go that way. That's the path to suffering. Come this way. This is the way out of suffering. But they cannot, they're not magical beings that can miraculously take away our ignorance. If they could, then out of their great compassion, they would have done that a long time ago and just given us enlightenment. But we have to do the work ourselves. So they're reaching out to us. The way that Buddhas and Bodhisattvas benefit us is by teaching the Dharma. So they're constantly reaching out to us, but we have to reach back. And we do this by learning the Dharma and working to put it into practice. So at the end of the day, we have to do the work. So this is what nirvana is. Nirvana, in the Mahayana context, is becoming a Buddha. Okay. And so these 3 or 4 Dharma seals, one way in which these are used is in looking at a Dharma teaching and saying, well, is this an authentic Dharma teaching? Does it talk about impermanence? Does it talk about suffering? Does it talk about non-self? Does it talk about nirvana? Then this is an authentic Dharma teaching. If there's a Dharma teaching that says, or something that claims to be a Buddhist teaching that says, there is no nirvana, God created everything, and our goal is to be